In 1628, the Swedish warship Vasa, technologically one of the most powerful vessels of her time, tragically sank on her maiden voyage.
The drone descends into the murky depths, its advanced sonar pulses cutting through the darkness. Its target isn't a new discovery, but one of the most famous shipwrecks in history, the Vasa. The mission was simple, a routine scan to monitor the old wood's decay. But the data that came back was anything but routine.
Knowledgeable people on board must have realized already that there was something wrong.
The sonar was so powerful it created a three-dimensional image of not just the ship, but of the people inside at the exact moment of the disaster. What the drone saw has rewritten the story of the Vasa's tragic end in the most shocking way imaginable. The Eye of the Deep. For centuries, the story of the Vasa was sealed in the cold, dark waters of Stockholm Harbor. It was a tale of immense pride and even greater failure. A warship meant to be the terror of the Baltic Sea, the crown jewel of the Swedish Navy that met its demise less than a mile from shore. When it was finally raised from the depths in 1961, the world gasped. It was a relic from another time, almost perfectly preserved. The most shocking fact is that its discovery was thought to be the final chapter. But the thing nobody tells you is that technology has just peeled back another layer of this story, and what it found is utterly haunting. Recently, a next-generation submersible drone was deployed to conduct a high-resolution scan of the Vasa's hull. This wasn't just any drone. It was equipped with a new kind of acoustic imaging sonar, a system 100 times more powerful than the standard equipment used for underwater archaeology. The goal was simple, to create a detailed map of the ship's structural integrity. What many overlooked was the sheer power of this new tech. It didn't just map the wood, it could differentiate between densities with pinpoint accuracy, essentially making the ship's massive oak frame transparent. The data it sent back to the surface was beyond belief. The team of researchers stared at their screens, their blood running cold. The sonar had captured a ghostly echo of the ship's final terrible moments. It had mapped the exact locations of the skeletal remains of the crew and passengers who went down with the ship. But this was different from old archaeological diagrams. The resolution was so fine, the detail so precise that it rendered the human forms in 3D. You could see the clusters of people on the lower gun deck huddled together in a desperate attempt to find safety. You could see the sailors who were trying to cut the cannons loose to stabilize the ship. The sonar even detected the faint outlines of their clothing, preserved for centuries in the oxygen-free mud. The most chilling revelation came from a small space near the ship's hold. Here, the drone mapped the remains of a woman clutching a small child. The detail was so heartbreakingly clear that the sonar could distinguish the small bones of the infant from the arms of its mother. It was a static image of a parent's last act. A desperate, futile attempt at protection against the rushing water. For the first time, this wasn't just a collection of artifacts, it was a human scene frozen for nearly 400 years. The drone's powerful eye had transformed the Vasa from a museum piece into a tomb, revealing the raw, personal terror of its sinking. To put it mildly, the discovery changed everything. It begged the question, what other secrets was this ghost ship hiding? The truth is, the Vasa was never just a ship, it was a statement. Built during the height of the 30 Years' War, it was the pet project of Sweden's ambitious king, Gustavus Adolphus. He wanted a vessel that would be the most heavily armed, most intimidating warship afloat. He personally intervened in its design, demanding more and more firepower. The ship was a monster, measuring nearly 226 feet long and soaring over 170 feet high from its keel to the top of its mainmast. It carried a staggering 64 heavy bronze cannons, far more than any ship of its size at the time. Each cannon weighed over 3,000 pounds, and you can see this everywhere in its design, pride and power. The ship was covered in over 700 ornate painted sculptures designed to glorify the king and terrify his enemies. It was a floating work of art and a weapon of unprecedented might. But hidden within all that power and beauty was a fatal flaw, a secret that would soon be revealed in the most public and tragic way possible. But the king's grand ambition concealed a deadly design secret, a king's fatal pride. Many people are crazy about the story of the Vasa's sinking, but to truly understand why it happened, you have to look at how it was built. You see, this was a project driven by the ego of one man, King Gustavus Adolphus. He was at war in Poland and wanted to send a message to all of Europe. The Vasa was that message, written in oak and bronze. The problem was, the king knew a lot about warfare, but very little about shipbuilding. The thing nobody tells you is that the ship's original designer passed away mid-construction, leaving his inexperienced apprentice to finish the job under immense pressure from the crown. The king kept changing the plans. The most critical change was his demand for a second, fully armed gun deck. This was almost unheard of for a ship of the Vasa's dimensions. It meant stacking dozens of massive heavy cannons high above the waterline. The shipbuilders knew this was dangerous. It would make the ship incredibly top-heavy, like trying to balance a pyramid on its point. But who was going to argue with an all-powerful king? To make matters worse, the ship's hull was narrow. It was designed for speed, not for carrying the immense weight of 64 cannons, hundreds of sailors, and tons of supplies. There was a test done before the ship ever set sail. It was a simple stability test. 30 men were ordered to run back and forth across the top deck to see how much the ship would roll. After just 3 passes, the ship was rocking so violently that the admiral in charge had to call off the test, fearing the ship would capsize right there at the dock. This was a massive red flag, a clear warning that the Vasa was dangerously unstable. In a normal situation, the ship would have been sent back to the shipyard for major modifications. But the king was impatient. He wanted his superweapon in the water, and no one had the courage to tell him it was a floating death trap. What many overlooked was the sheer scale of the resources poured into this single vessel. Over 1,000 oak trees were felled to create its frame, enough to deforest over 40 acres of land. The bronze used for its cannons was a significant portion of the entire kingdom's output. It was an all-in bet, a massive gamble on a single piece of military hardware. And as the day of its maiden voyage approached, the city of Stockholm was buzzing with excitement. Thousands of people, from nobles to commoners, gathered at the harbor to witness the launch of the most magnificent ship they had ever seen. They were about to witness history, but not in the way any of them expected. The stage was set for a national triumph that would, in less than an hour, become a national trauma. The ship was a masterpiece of art, but a disaster of engineering. 1 mile of glory. On August 10th, 1628, the Vasa was ready. The weather was calm, with only a light breeze blowing. The harbor was packed with spectators on the shore and in small boats, all cheering as the mighty warship fired a salute from its cannons. On board, sailors were busy hoisting the massive sails. Families of the crew were also on the ship, invited along for the glorious first leg of the journey before the ship headed off to war. There was a sense of celebration in the air. The pride of Sweden was finally setting sail. To put it mildly, that pride would be short-lived. The ship was towed out into the harbor, and with 4 of its 10 sails set, it began to move under its own power. It had traveled less than a mile, just a few thousand feet from the shore. As it passed the cliffs of Södermalm, a sudden gust of wind hit the sails. It wasn't a storm, not even a strong gale, but it was enough. The top-heavy ship leaned hard to its port side. For a terrifying moment, it hung there, struggling to right itself. But then a second, stronger gust hit. This time, the lean was catastrophic. The most shocking fact is that the lower gun ports were still open from the salute fired earlier. As the ship tipped, water began pouring in through these openings. From there, the end was swift and brutal. The weight of the water rushing into the lower deck sealed the ship's fate. It listed so heavily that the tons of stone ballast in its hold shifted, pulling the ship over onto its side. Panic erupted on deck. Within minutes, in full view of the horrified crowds, the magnificent Vasa warship slipped beneath the waves and vanished, leaving only ripples and debris on the surface. It all happened so fast. At least 30 people, and perhaps as many as 50, lost their lives in the disaster. They were trapped below decks, unable to escape the sudden inrush of water and the chaos. For Sweden, it was a national humiliation. The king, who was in Poland, was furious when he heard the news, demanding to know who was to blame. But the truth was, the blame lay with his own ambition. The Vasa came to rest on the seabed about 105 feet down, and there it would stay in the cold, brackish water of the harbor for 333 years. The low salinity water, with its lack of oxygen, was the perfect environment to preserve the ship, protecting it from the shipworms that would have devoured it in the open ocean. It became a sunken monument to failed ambition, waiting in the dark to be found. The greatest warship in the world was now a silent underwater tomb, a daring rescue. For over 3 centuries, the Vasa was the stuff of legends. People knew it was out there, but finding its exact location in the murky harbor was another matter entirely. That is, until an amateur archaeologist named Anders Franzen came along in the 1950s. Many people are crazy about finding lost treasures, and Franzen was obsessed with the Vasa. He spent years studying old naval records and dragging a homemade core sampler across the harbor floor. Then, in 1956, he pulled up a plug of blackened oak. He had found it. The ghost ship was no longer a ghost. What followed was one of the most ambitious marine salvage operations in history. For 5 years, divers worked in near total darkness, tunneling under the ship's hull to pass 6 massive steel cables. The thing nobody tells you is how delicate this operation was. The wood, while preserved, had the consistency of wet cardboard. On April 24, 1961, the world watched as the Vasa, a dark, hulking shape covered in mud, broke the surface for the first time in 333 years. It was a breathtaking moment. A piece of the 17th century had returned to the world of the living, but the work was just beginning. The ship was a treasure trove containing thousands of artifacts, from the sailors' clothing and tools to the remains of the ship's sails, the oldest surviving sails in the world, and of course the remains of those who perished. It took decades of painstaking work to preserve the ship, constantly spraying it with a special solution to prevent the wood from crumbling as it dried. And as the years went on, we thought we learned all we could. But you see, the story wasn't over. That new sonar drone scan proves that even now the Vasa has secrets to give up. The images it captured, those haunting human outlines, are a stark reminder that this is more than just a ship. So, are we missing a key detail? Did this all happen because of a simple design flaw, or is there more to the story? The thing is, every time we look at the Vasa with new technology, it tells us something new. It speaks of the people who built it, the people who sailed on it, and the people who met their end within its oaken walls. It's a powerful lesson in how pride can lead to disaster, but it's also a testament to the incredible power of preservation and the unending quest to uncover the full story. The Vasa is not a closed book. It's a story that's still being written, one shocking discovery at a time. The Vasa teaches us that history is never truly settled. Was this epic failure a simple accident, or was it a deliberate act of sabotage to weaken a powerful king? Let us know your thoughts below. Don't forget to like and subscribe.